You have to look for this at the end. It's hard to believe. Good morning. It's hard to believe that that this is something that we can make a difference. This is something that Hashem has to do. Now we can't make this happen. It's too big. So in the chapter 6, we brought the sources that show that no, redemption is not something which is only in the hands of tzaddikim and certain exceptional individuals, but every single person has the power by adding something positive in Torah, mitzvahs, thought, speech, or action. Young people, older people, even children, men, women, makes no difference. Anybody adding something positive could tip the scale, and that could bring Mashiach. Even though it's something huge, but so much has been done already, especially now that we're in a place that all you need to do is, there's one thing you might add, and that could tip the scale. So now we're going to a second question. We started this last week, but didn't get too far. And that is, are there certain mitzvahs that are more conducive and more designed in some way spiritually to help bring Mashiach? What does that mean? All mitzvahs bring more godliness into the world. More godliness is like saying more light takes away the darkness. So all mitzvahs contribute to this process. But we know that mitzvahs, each mitzvah also has a specific property in it. For example, we gave the example last week that if somebody would write to the Rebbe that they have, there was a break-in in their house, some burglar came into the house and they stole things, the Rebbe would definitely write, check the mezuzahs in your house. Sometimes people write that there's a child who's not feeling well, the Rebbe would say, check the mezuzah of that child's room. If a person has a situation, there are stories of people who had a situation, let's say, with their eyes, with their heart. And the Rebbe was, I remember hearing the story. We actually, there's an organization, it's no longer an organization, it's like a big business now, in Borough Park. All they do, only one thing, they check mezuzahs and tefillin. That alone is enough to have a business running. But I remember he once came to speak to students, and it's not a Chabad organization. He said that most of the people that came to us initially were people that the Rebbe referred them to checking it. And he said one of the most astonishing things were that we found very often a relationship between what was wrong in the tefillin or the mezuzahs and the thing that they were concerned about. I heard this once from someone that also not a Chabad person. In fact, there was a conversation going. I was in a different city. I went to a wedding, and somebody in that conversation made some not nice remarks about Chabad. So one of the people in that community gets up and says, relax. Don't be careful with what you say. And I want to tell you a personal story. And he said his daughter had an ear infection. They gave her antibiotic, it didn't help. And she had a lot of pain. They changed the antibiotic, it still didn't help. She was in a lot of pain. Changed the antibiotic again, it still didn't help. The doctors were getting worried because there's an infection by the eardrum, on the eardrum. And if antibiotic doesn't help, God forbid, and this infection moves, it's not far from the brain, and it could be, God forbid, the worst thing that could happen. So they started even to consider maybe they'll just have to cut out the eardrum because antibiotic is not helping. Because the family was desperate, but somebody said to them, why don't you write to the Rebbe? He wrote to the Rebbe, and the Rebbe wrote back to check the mezuzah in this girl's room. So he said, we checked the mezuzah. The sofer, the one who checks the mezuzah, said, I think it was the word v'haya im shamaya. In the Shema, if she will listen, that word had something wrong with it. And he said, I don't want to, I could have corrected it. No, I bought a new mezuzah completely, put on the mezuzah, and the same day we put on the mezuzah, the pain subsided. And when I took it to the doctor, the next time, the doctor looks, and he looks at me and says, is this the same girl that you were bringing into before? Said, I guarantee, I'll show you the bills, it's the same person. And he says the reason why he's asking is because normally, even if there was medication that healed the infection, there's usually some scar there. You can tell there was an infection. And here I don't even see any scars, it's just gone. So what does it mean that because it's her room and it's mezuzah had an effect, and the word shema had an effect on her hearing? Or the word levavacha, which says the heart, had an effect on somebody's heart. And similar things to that. So too, there are certain mitzvahs that they are specifically have the power and they can help bring Mashiach closer. Which are those mitzvahs? And that's what the Rebbe spoke about, that now is the time we should focus more on those mitzvahs. Let's go through some of them. We went through page 1 in chapter 7. Let's turn to page 2. Unity. Let's read that really please. By the way, on top of the page it says from exile to redemption. So these things are taken from a book called From Exile to Redemption, and it has small little quotes from different sikhs. The redemption will unify all of Israel, from the greatest to the smallest, for no single Jew will remain in exile. This is something that reiterates many, many times. The Medrash says every time the Jews were in exile and then they were freed and liberated, not always did everybody go out. This happened in Egypt. It happened when they were in exile in Babylon. It happened in different stories throughout history. Hanukkah, Purim. When Mashiach comes, no Jew will be left behind. Everybody will be part of it. Moreover, the multitude who will then be gathered are all described collectively in a singular term. It says a great congregation will return, using a term that includes everybody as one. So being that Mashiach comes, all Jews will go out and will all be one. In preparation for this state, therefore one should make every endeavor to unify all the different kinds of Jews in a spirit of Ahavat Yisrael, love for a fellow Jew, and Achdus Yisrael, the unity of Jews. Anything that's done to bring Jews together, to unite together, and interact together in a positive way is something which will hasten the coming of Mashiach. Because when Mashiach comes, all the Jews together as one will go out of Golus. One of the principles throughout a lot of these things are that when you prepare for something that's supposed to happen and you want to make that happen, the way to prepare is something that you're doing something which is similar to what's supposed to happen. I mean, think of it begashmias. If a person is training to become a doctor, how do they train to become a doctor? By learning how to dance? By learning how to sing? It's about studying medicine. Not only studying medicine, observing a doctor, doing internship, and because you're not a doctor yet, but that's how you're prepared to become a doctor. If a person is preparing for any kind of position, they prepare by learning more about what happens when you're in that position. Spiritually, if we're preparing for Mashiach, it also means that we should now be thinking and also acting in a way that's going to be when Mashiach comes. So one of those things are when Mashiach comes, all Jews will be united. So how do we prepare for that? By uniting now. That's what it's saying here. Another thing, where I'm not doing every piece, the ones that have a check next to it. Faith. I was saying to say, by the virtue of faith of our forefathers, we were redeemed from Mitzrayim. Which means it was very difficult for the Yidden to have a munah that they're going out of Egypt. Because they were there for 210 years. They were slaves. They were being persecuted. The Egyptians were the so-called superpower of that generation. The Gemara says, never in the history of Egypt did it happen that even one single slave escaped. So there was no way anyone even thought that they're going to go out ever. However, they were promised that they're going to go out. So some people had that faith, some people didn't. So the Gemara says, they didn't really have mitzvahs in those days, and not everybody observed mitzvahs. In many ways, they acted no different than the Egyptians. So what was the merit that in that merit they went out? It was their faith. Our future redemption will likewise come about by virtue of the fact that our people, disregarding the thick darkness of our present exile, there's so much going on. And when you look around, people say, I can't believe that this is ever going to change. Nevertheless, believe firmly in the imminent coming of Mashiach, that brings Mashiach closer. The next one is about the power of women. But there's a phrase in Gemara, a quote from Gemara, by virtue of the pious women of that generation, our forefathers were redeemed from Egypt. In the same way, the future generation, the future redemption will come about by virtue of the spiritual labors of Jewish women and girls. We see, therefore, let's continue on the next page, that the three particular mitzvahs which have been entrusted to Jewish women and girls. Number one, lighting candles for Shabbos and Yom Tov. Number two, separating the tithe of the challah from bread and baked goods. And number three, observing the laws of family purity, all involve needs which are basic to all humanity, including Gentiles, light, food, family life. It is the task of Jewish women and girls to ensure that these activities be undertaken in a distinctively Jewish manner, highlighting the connection of the candle lighting with the Shabbos and Yom Tov, the kashrus of family food and drink, and the purity of the family. So these labors constitute a preparation for the coming of Mashiach, when the very materiality of the world will be refined. So all these things have to refine us in a very physical sense, the food we eat, and the physical light, and of course family purity. So basically, being that it says that, the Rebbe would always use this quote, he probably said it 1,000 times, V'schus nashim tzidkaniyos, which means in the merit of the righteous women, we will go out of Egypt. In fact, the Rebbe would add another thing. That Rizal writes that the women in the generation of Mashiach are a Gilgul, which means they are reincarnation of the women who went out of Egypt. And being that this is that generation, that's what the Rebbe said, that means the souls of the women in our generation are reincarnation of the souls of those women that brought the redemption. So therefore the women here are also empowered to bring the redemption. I'm not sure if you're familiar and you know the history, but the way and the things that the Rebbe did regarding women becoming shluchas, and everything else that goes along with it is something which did not happen in previous generations. And in most other Hasidic courts, you don't find that the Rebbe had a direct sort of interaction, relation with women in the community. It was mainly with the men, and through the men, it went over to the women. This way it was by the Alter Rebbe, the Mittel Rebbe, the Tzemach Tzedek, the Rebbe Marash, the Rebbe Rashab. The first one that started something was the previous Rebbe. In 1933, he started a new thing that women should study Hasidus, which never happened before. 1933. And I think he even spoke to the women. Women went in to speak to him personally. Our Rebbe went even further than that. As you probably know, and maybe you've seen the videos, the Rebbe gave out dollars to the women. The Rebbe would go into 770, and all the women came in. The Rebbe spoke only to the women. Not the men weren't even there. The Rebbe gave the Sfarim, when the Rebbe would give out a Tanya or give out other Sfarim of Chassidus. It was one of the ways of the Rebbe giving his bracha to everyone. It was also to women, just like to men. So, and the fact that the Rebbe established an army of women who are shluchas that are changing the world. Obviously, this is something which is extremely unusual in other places. I'm talking about other Hasidic places, and definitely in Chabad itself, it's something which is unprecedented. Why? The Rebbe himself explained why. Because now we're ready for redemption, and the key of redemption are in the hands of the women. So women have to be empowered in a way that they never were before. Now, this I'm adding. This is not in the Rebbe's Sichos. But of course, in recent years, we see there's a lot of emphasis on women's liberation movements, empowering women. Unfortunately, that takes things sometimes a little bit off off the right track into a negative place. But the idea that now is a time in the last amount of time that there's so much emphasis on giving women so much more power than they had in previous generations, I would say that this is evolved from the way it is in Torah. That now, for the right reasons and for true reasons, women are empowered because they're the ones who are going to bring Mashiach. The next one is actually printing Tanyas. I'm not sure if you're familiar with one of the Rebbe's campaigns. It started in 1984. Was to print Tanyas in every place in the world possible. In fact, yesterday it was a new printing. Guess where? In Syria. They never were able to print a Tanya there.
I saw the flag.
What?
I saw the Mashiach flag.
Mashiach flag. That I didn't see, but I saw that. Yeah.
The guys, they went over there.
Well, there's a story circulating. I don't know, but this is the story circulating. There was someone, a Chabad Chassid in Israel, by the name of Boaz Kali. He had an organization called 7 to 70.
That's the one. They put the flag.
And he which means 7 mitzvahs for the 70 nations. And in 2014, there was a convention in Chabad about Mashiach. And he got up and he said, and he would go to Arab villages, talk to them about 7 mitzvahs of Noach, and they accepted it. He went to Arab, what are they called? Sheikhs, they're leaders, they're spiritual leaders, and they also were happy to accept it. And he said that he had a secret meeting with an individual who was like a leader in this rebel movement. Turns out to be this guy who just conquered Syria. And he spoke to him also about the Shem Mitzvah. In fact, they sat down together to write a letter to the Rebbe. He was asking a bracha that he should succeed. And he said to him, and before he left, he gave him a gift. It was a Mashiach flag, and on it he wrote, "We want Mashiach now," in Arabic. And he said to him, this is what he said publicly, that when I get into Syria, if I conquer the place, I'm going to put up that flag. Okay. So,
yeah, I saw the video.
But I don't know if he did it.
No, yeah, well, the video showed that it was that guy.
Really?
Yeah.
That I'd like to see. I didn't see.
Has it.
I think it was a Chabad that put it up, but we'll check it out. Okay.
It looks like a Syrian.
If it was a Syrian, we really have to say L'chaim then. Come on.
On TV.
Right. I mentioned to the other class, I don't know if I mentioned in your class, that besides the fact that all the people that understand the politics in the Middle East say that Syria was like the centerpiece. Syria is what connected Hezbollah, Iran, and all the Russia. Everything was going through Syria. That's where they had all the weapons, and which Israel is destroying now. But also the Rebbe himself said something like this years ago. Right? Let's speak to you about it, about Gem. There's a Gem video. You can hear a person speaking. This is a person that was in the Israeli consulate here in New York. And every year, the people who were in the Israeli consulate in Manhattan, they would come to the Rebbe for Hakafas on Simchas Torah. Whenever they came, the Rebbe would bring them up to his platform and talk to them. This person says, this was right after Yom Kippur War. Yom Kippur War was with Syria. And he spoke to us for almost an hour. And one of the things the Rebbe was emphasizing is Israel should go in and conquer Damascus. And he said, I'm asking you to call up whoever you're connected to in government and tell them that I'm telling them they should conquer Damascus. And he says that he came home and he called this office and someone else called another office and said, the Lubavitch Rebbe told you you should conquer Damascus. And they said to him that they spoke about it, but Moshe Dayan, who was the general at the time, he said he's afraid to do that because then Russia's going to get involved and then it'll be too much for Israel to handle. So he didn't want to do it and he didn't do it. But he said the Rebbe told him Damascus and Yerushalayim, it's like a seesaw. If Yerushalayim goes up, Damascus goes down. If Damascus goes up, Yerushalayim goes down. So we can't have both up. We have to bring down Damascus and then Yerushalayim will go up. And that's what we're saying now. And then there was the Medrash that says, Rav Shimon Bar Yochai said Elio Hanavi told me, I'm going to give you a sign. The sign is when you see the king of Syria fall, then you know that Mashiach is coming. So we're pretty exciting times now.
Is there a timeline between that?
Today, before 6 o'clock. So why do they print the Tanya there? Because the Rebbe once requested, and there was a big, the Rebbe put a lot of emphasis on this, to print the Tanya wherever you can. Every country, every city, every area. I remember when we actually once printed a Tanya here in this building for that reason. We printed one at the dorm. What's this thing with printing Tanya? To make it brief, remember we had a class in this booklet that the Baal Shem Tov said, revealing the hidden secrets of Torah in this world brings Mashiach closer. Remember that? And we explained why. Because Mashiach is all about the hidden secrets of Torah being revealed. Hashem himself, who is hidden, will become revealed. It's like we just said, if you want to reach a certain goal, the preparation is by doing those things that are going to happen. So the preparation is revealing Chassidus. And when you print something, it's much different than when you write it. In what way? Some Tzaddik once said, when you say something, you don't know how long that's going to hang around because people might forget what you said. When you put it down in writing, that's going to stay longer because it's in writing. So people will have it and people will see it for a longer time period. When you print something, once it's printed, it's permanent. So in a sense, when Chassidus is brought down in a printed form, that is something which makes it more permanent, that it's more permanently present in this world. In fact, initially the Tanya was not printed. Alter Rebbe wrote the Tanya, but it wasn't printed. It was written, and they made copies of the written form. And why did they change it? Why did the Alter Rebbe agree to print it? Only because of something that happened. And that is that they noticed there were Tanyas circulating, and there were certain things in Tanya which not only wasn't correct, but it actually statements that seemed to be contradicting Torah. And what happened was that those who were in opposition to Chassidus made this public. They brought it to a Beth Din, and they ruled that there's things in Tanya which is our, God forbid, heresy. We have to burn the Tanya. And they said you can burn the Tanya publicly. So basically, it was based on not a misinterpretation. Literally, people took the Tanyas. When it's in writing, you can change a word, you can add a word, and sometimes just adding one word, adding one letter, or taking away a word or a letter could change the meaning of the whole thing. And that's what they did. So initially, they weren't sure that that's what's happening. They thought there are mistakes, but maybe it's just every time you make a copy, you rewrite it, you can make mistakes. One time, there were two Chassidim of the Alter Rebbe, and they were businessmen as well, and they went to a fair, a business fair, and they saw somebody selling copies of Tanya. So at first, they were very happy. Wow, Tanya is getting around in this place. It was people from Lithuania. Then he picked up a Tanya, and they noticed something wasn't right. So they walked over to this person and started a conversation with him. Now, if you know, the Chabad Hasidim look very, very similar to the Jews in Lithuania who were the opposition. The other Hasidim, they have long payas, and their whole dress is different. Even their Yiddish is a different language. Not a different language, a different Yiddish. But Chabad and Lithuanians, they look very similar and speak very similar. So you couldn't tell. And he thought that this person is one of theirs. So he said, these are the Tanyas. I made certain changes here. And it really discredits Tanya. I brought 600 copies and I'm going to spread it out. When they heard that, so they said to him, listen, we'll buy it off you and we'll get it to places you'll never get it in those places. We know a lot of people here. And you don't have to bother. Sell me the whole 600 copies and we'll take care of it. They told the 600 copies. Of course, they brought it all back. They showed the Alter Rebbe, here's this. And the person said clearly that he put in these distortions intentionally. And that's when the Alter Rebbe agreed to print Tanya. But nevertheless, printing the Tanya meant that the teachings of Chassidus became something more permanent, settled in this world. To the extent that in 1848, the Alter Rebbe once said that 1848 is one of those times that is conducive for Mashiach's coming. 1848. So at that time, the Rebbe was the Tzemach Tzedek, the third Rebbe of Chabad. So his son, the Rebbe Marash, said to his father, the Alter Rebbe said 1848 Mashiach is supposed to come, and look, it's 1848 and nothing's happening. So he said, but don't you realize the Likutei Torah was just printed? Likutei Torah was Maimarim of Chassidus that the Alter Rebbe said, and for the first time in history, those Maimarim were printed. Of course, the Rebbe Marash answered him, but we want Mashiach in a literal sense. He said, yeah, you're right. But the mere fact that he can tell them that this is Mashiach means, what's Mashiach? God that is being revealed in the world. So the fact that these Maimarim, which is revealing Chassidus, came in a printed form makes it more permanently in this world. And that is, in a spiritual sense, Mashiach. But that's not good enough. But the mere fact that it's a spiritual sense Mashiach, you say, wait a second, it's not new. It's something which he already said, but it's only printed. So you see from this story that printing it is a much more, a greater level of revealing it, because when you print it, it becomes permanent. And on that basis, they're requested to print Tanya everywhere. And when you print it, it has a spiritual effect in the city or the country or the neighborhood where you're printing it. So here he says like this: since in the future redemption, that a single Jew will remain in exile, it is clear that the redemption of every individual Jew has a bearing on the redemption of the entire Jewish people. So it's our duty to work with every Jew to ensure that he will be ready for redemption. One of the ways this is accomplished by disseminating the Torah, and especially the hidden, innermost, mystical dimension of Torah, wherever Jews are to be found, and wherever even only one single Jew is to be found, to print. Therefore, in order that the wellsprings itself should reach the furthermost places, the Tanya should be printed everywhere, for it is the written law of the teachings of Chassidus. Tanya is the source of everything else in Chassidus. Let's turn the page to page 4. So on page 4 and 5, in both places, it says education, which means giving little young children, boys and girls, a Torah education. That also helps bringing Mashiach closer. There's a pasuk where it says in Tehillim, chapter 8, from the mouths of babes and sucklings you have founded strength, which means even little babies. What does that mean? It means by raising little children in a Torah way. This is something very precious to Hashem, and this is something which makes the Jewish people strong, that they'll be able to overcome all those that are opposing us. Because the pasuk is talking about strength. Little children have strength. They don't have any strength. These are not your typical soldiers that go into an army. Little children that are nursing children. So what does it mean? It means spiritual strength. The Gemara says when little children study Torah, the words that come out of their mouth is pure because they're innocent, and that has a tremendous spiritual power. Also, the second thing with the check on it, on page number 5, it says that concerning the era of redemption, it says, I shall pour my spirit upon your seed and my blessing upon your offspring. And it continues that I will pour my spirit of prophecy on your sons and your daughters. Everyone will have the power of prophecy because God has to be revealed. So plainly refers quite literally to one's sons and daughters. Since all the revelation of the future depends on our present action and our divine service, propagating the Torah education of Jewish children becomes a matter of utmost importance. Not only is it important for the children to grow up with Jewish values, but this has to do with bringing Mashiach. Another thing that brings Mashiach in general is kashrus and family purity, page 6. You notice all the mitzvahs, all the when the Rebbe came out with the mitzvah campaign, unfortunately, the Rebbe had a lot of people out there who were in opposition to the things the Rebbe did. And no matter what the Rebbe did, there was a reason to come out against it. So I remember when the Rebbe came out the first time with the mitzvah tefillin campaign, one of the arguments was, why tefillin? Why not something else? You know what the Rebbe's answer was? Go ahead, take something else, make a campaign out of it. There are 612 mitzvahs left for you to choose from. And then the Rebbe gave an explanation why tefillin, of course. But we'll notice that all the campaigns of the Rebbe, they're all mitzvahs that have an association with bringing Mashiach. So kashrus and family purity is also one of them. It says that our forefathers were in the wilderness, but on the eve of their entry into the land of Israel, before they went into Eretz Yisrael, that's when they were commanded to be vigilant with kashrus of their vessels and with the purity and sanctity of their family life. So in our days, we're also in the last days of Golus. Our generation should be particularly vigilant with these two mitzvahs, with kashrus and laws of family purity, as a preparation for our entry into the land of Israel together with Mashiach. Another thing which brings Mashiach is Torah study in general. The Zohar teaches us that as a result of wasting opportunity for Torah study, the day on which Mashiach will redeem us from this evil is postponed. In other words, the Zohar writes, this mainly for men, have an obligation to use all their free time for Torah study. And if they don't, it's called bittul Torah. It's violating a commandment for men. So the Zohar writes, in fact, that's the violation that delays the coming of Mashiach. So clearly, if men do study Torah as often as they can, then this will hasten Mashiach's coming. Another thing is, being that we say that we need to bring Mashiach by preparing what's going to happen when Mashiach comes. On page 7, describing the time after the coming of Mashiach, the Rambam writes, in that era, the occupation of the whole world will be to know Hashem. So therefore, in the present, one should take the study of Torah as a preparation by sampling, and it's a foretaste of this time of Mashiach. Number 8 is also explaining another thing. With every Jewish infant born, the redemption is brought closer. This is one of the big things that I'm sure it's talked about in the Jewish home classes, about people who want to limit their family and have just 1 or 2 children. According to Torah, we shouldn't do that. We should have as many children as a person can have unless there's a medical problem or other reasons. So one of the reasons why it's so important to emphasize this, besides the fact, this is what the Torah says, but why this mitzvah? Because there's a saying in Gemara, it says like this, the son of David will not come until there are no souls left in the heavenly treasury. What does that mean? It says that in Shamayim, in heaven, there's a place where all the souls are found. And from there, they come down to this world. Only once that place becomes empty, and all the souls come down here, that's when Mashiach comes. So I guess when people prevent themselves from having children, there are souls that are meant to come down that don't come down. So the more children that are born, which means the more souls that come down to this world, that also hastens the coming of Mashiach. Number 9. Another thing is halachic decision on redemption. What does that mean? The Rebbe met with someone from Israel. His name was Rabbi Yochanan Sofer. Not only is he a great Torah sage, but he's also an authority of halacha. So the Rebbe said to him, since you engage in rendering halachic decision, you should render a halachic decision that our righteous Mashiach must come. And see to it that your decision is actually immediately fulfilled. What does this mean? Basically, it says in Gemara that Hashem follows the decision of the halacha that's ruled down here in this world. it said specifically regarding to Rosh Chodesh. The Gemara says that when the angels say to Hashem, when is the new month? So Hashem says, let's go down to see what the court of rabbis here in this world ruled when is going to be the first day of the new month. And that'll be the first day of the new month. In other words, whatever they rule, Hashem goes by that. Of course, these stories have much more depth to it, but it means that the things that go on in heaven have to do with the ruling down here. And therefore, and of course, if Hashem tells us to follow the Torah, he also follows the Torah. He certainly follows the Torah. So the Rebbe said if rabbis who give halachic rulings would all get together and give a ruling, we've done our time, and now Mashiach has to come. That ruling will bring Mashiach's coming closer. So whenever a rabbi who had halachic authority would come to the Rebbe, I remember the chief rabbis of Israel came, any rabbi, the Rebbe would say to them, why didn't you give such? And actually people did that. They made a statement, a ruling, and they asked rabbis to sign on it, that we also agree that it's time for Mashiach to come. And if enough rabbis, I guess, they sign and give that ruling, Hashem will follow the ruling, will bring Mashiach.
Just some rabbis opposed to it?
What?
Were there some rabbis that were not okay with that?
Yeah. In other words, the rabbis who didn't do it because they didn't think that really makes a difference. They thought of it more like, it's a nice gesture, not a real. But the Rebbe said it's very real. And when a Bezdin, the Gemara brings examples that when a Bezdin gives a ruling, it can change things here, even in the physical world. It's the power of Torah can have an effect. The Rebbe once told a story. There was one of the greatest sages of the previous generation. His name was Rabbi Yosef Rosen. Lived in a place called, it was called the Rabbi Majeski. That was his name. That's where he came from. But he lived in Leningrad at the end. Anyway, he got a letter from the Russian government that he has to pay 2 taxes, that he owes money to the Russian government. And his whole life was Torah. Any word you said to him, the instant you said a word, it registered something in Gemara. And everything was related to Gemara. He was considered one of the most brilliant minds of that generation. The Rebbe actually had a personal relationship with him. Anyway, when he got these letters from the government, he called in his son-in-law and said to him, wait a second, these taxes, according to Torah, I'm obligated to pay because of this and this reason. The other tax, I'm not obligated to pay that according to Torah because of this and this reason. And he started bringing sources in Torah why he's not obligated to pay it. The Rebbe smiled and said a few days later, he got a letter from the Russian government, and they write to him, there was a mistake. The second tax, he doesn't have to pay. And the Rebbe says, whoever knows anything about Russia will know that there's nothing short of a miracle. That they should write that it was a mistake in general and pull back something that they ordered for someone to. So how did it happen? Because once he gave a Torah ruling that this is unacceptable, it became unacceptable. Sometimes the Rebbe would say that about health, to go to a rabbi that he should rule that this person has to be healthy. So there's a power. Torah has a certain power. Remember, let's not forget that Hashem created the world with Torah, through Torah. So if it's ruled in Torah that this and this has to happen, then that happens. And the same would be regarding the subject of Mashiach. The next one is probably one of the most popular ones, and that's tzedakah. A famous quote. A lot of people have printed on the pushka, and that is that in the merit of tzedakah, in that merit, Yidden will go out of Golus. In these times, when the approaching footsteps of Mashiach are close upon us, the principal service of Hashem is the service of tzedakah. And like our sages have taught us, Israel, meaning the nation of Israel, will be deemed only by virtue of tzedakah. For at this time, when the footsteps of Mashiach are close upon us, it says the sukkah of David, which is a way of alluding to the divine presence, has fallen to a level of the feet and the heels. This is a quote from Tanya. To the level of the lowest of the world, which is known as the world of Asiya. And for this reason, the way to cleave to the divine presence in our times is through a corresponding category of action, namely the practice of tzedakah. And whoever sacrifices impulses in this respect, which means it's hard to give away money, but I overcome that and I give tzedakah, opens his hand and his heart, will merit to behold the eye to eye Hashem returning to him. So basically, tzedakah is definitely one of the mitzvahs that hasten the coming of Mashiach. Number one, because tzedakah is something which is very physical, and we want Mashiach in the most physical sense. Number two, let's not forget, tzedakah is also an act of Avos Yisrael. Here's a person, I don't owe them anything. They didn't do any work for me. It's a person, I don't even know this person, but he's stretching out his hand, and I'm giving him, whether it's food or clothing or money. And therefore, we've also turned to Hashem, and we say, Hashem, you give us tzedakah. Plus, remember, we said this in the beginning of the last 2 weeks ago's class, that, remember, the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed because there was hatred amongst Jews. So if that was the cause for the destruction, then we have to do the opposite to rebuild it, which is Avos Yisrael. One more thing on page 11. We're going to spend more time on this. There's going to be a separate class going more into it, is the 7 Noahide laws. Being that when Mashiach comes, all the nations of the world will serve Hashem, and they're going to observe, they're not going to become Jewish necessarily, but they will serve Hashem and observe the 7 Noahide laws. So therefore, how do we prepare for Mashiach? By already now influencing and inspiring the rest of the world to observe their 7 Noahide laws. And the last thing is joy, simcha. When Mashiach comes, that's going to be a simcha that is beyond anything that ever existed since the beginning of creation. After so many thousands of years of Golus, and finally we have Geula, it'll be the greatest joy. And therefore, one of the ways of preparing for Mashiach is through simcha. We're being the simcha now. And the simcha comes as a result of my trust that Mashiach is coming. That alone hastens the coming of Mashiach. That's why the Rebbe so much emphasizes simcha. I remember once when the Rebbe spoke strongly about we have to let Hashem know that we want Mashiach and we want Mashiach to come. Somebody got up, it was on Shabbos, and he spoke on his own. He just got up and started to speak by the Farbrengen, which usually doesn't happen. Nobody else speaks. And he says that we want Mashiach, And he said, we're all crying for Mashiach to come. The Rebbe smiled and said, ask a Rav whether it's okay to cry on Shabbos. You're not allowed to cry on Shabbos. We want Mashiach to come, but as you realize, it's a song. We sing it. Because the way to bring Mashiach is not through crying, it's through singing. Why? Because the singing expresses our trust and in confidence that Hashem is bringing Mashiach now. So, Simcha is another one of those mitzvahs that hasten Mashiach's coming. If I left anything out that you're aware of, let me know. I'll add it to the booklet. Hopefully this will be sufficient. Okay, to be continued.
Yeah.
Good morning, everybody.